Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 5 of the USS Zandilar. So, continuing on with our story here today, a lingering shadow. Months later, the USS Zandilar NCC 52084 finally emerged from Starbase 12's dry dock. Repaired, every circuit conduit and sensor array has been purged of the insidious nanite sabotage. The experience had forged the ship into a tougher, more resilient vessel, but the scars on its crew had run far deeper than any hull plating. The goo that had once been Agent Kalen was meticulously recovered and immediately transported to a top secret Starfleet research facility. Its study was deemed critical to understanding the Obsidian Hand's capabilities, a horrifying blueprint of advanced bioinfiltration. Jason's ghoul, however, remained on the Zandilar. Uh, in a secure, sterile chamber within the ship's sick bay, the shimmering, sentient pool of genetic material pulsed with a faint internal light. It was contained within a specialized stasis field, carefully monitored by a tireless ensign, Jenny Pulvik. The decision to keep Jason's remains on board had been Nora's. Fiercely supported by the entire crew, they refused to surrender him, not after all they had been through. He was not a biological weapon, he was their friend. The Zandilar resumed its supply runs, a hollow echo of its former self. The crew performed their duties with professionalism, but the easy camaraderie, and the light-hearted banter was largely gone. A somber determination had replaced it. Captain Nora Richards carried the heaviest burden, the loss of Jason, the memory of Kalen's chilling triumph on her bridge, and the knowledge that the Obsidian Hand was still out there, fueled by a grim resolve. She was sharper, more vigilant, her command style now infused with a steeliness born out of profound loss and an unyielding commitment to prevent further tragedies. Ensign Daniel Key dedicated every spare moment of studying the molecular structure of the retrieved nanite goo, comparing it to the fragments of the master nanite controller. He worked in furious silence, driven by a profound guilt of having unwittingly provided Kalen with the tool to destroy Jason. His brilliance now carried a weight of sorrow. His equations aimed at understanding the nanites well enough to, perhaps, one day reverse what they had done. He rarely spoke of his feelings to Dina, the hopeful bud of affection now overshadowed by grief and the relentlessness uh, quest for answers. Let's see. Ensign Dina Debbing remained Daniel's steadfast partner in engineering. She was quieter than ever, her focus even more intense. She meticulously maintained the ship, ensuring no new threats could take root, but her gaze often drifted to the secure sickbay access, a quiet hope burning within her for Jason's return. She understood Daniel's pain, his guilt, but respected his need for silent focus. Their bond, forged in the crucible of keeping the Zandilar alive, now lay under a blanket of shared sorrow. Ensign Sarah Johnson's usual cheerfulness was dimmed. While she performed her astrogation duties flawlessly, her from the bridge were more subtle. The personal heartbreak of Mark's departure, combined with Jason's tragic fate, had matured her rapidly. She often found solace in long, silent shifts at the navigational console, mapping distant stars, perhaps searching for a solace that lay beyond their current struggles. She had found a new quiet strength and a deeper appreciation for the transient nature of life and companionship. And Ensign Jenny Povik, now directly responsible for Jason's goo, bore the weight of hope. She spent countless hours in sickbay running diagnostics, experimenting with microstimuli, and poring over every known medical and genetic text. She refused to give up, clinging to a slim possibility that the nanites, now inert, might still retain the core of Jason's former self, waiting for the right frequency, the right blueprint to be coaxed back to a stable living form. Her resolve was fierce, a testament to her dedication and the profound bond she shared with her friend. The Zandilar continued its mission, a ghost of its former crew occupying its decks. They delivered supplies, maintained the peace, and kept watch, but beneath the polished surface of the humming systems, a new mission, unspoken but deeply felt, pulsed through the heart of the ship to avenge their fallen comrade, to hunt down the obsidian hand and find a way, any way, to bring Jason Wellman back to his formless, back from the formless void, to reclaim a piece of what they had lost. The long road of grief and determination had only just begun. Jason, trapped within the shimmering, undifferent, differentiated goo in the sickbay uh, secure chamber, Jason Wellman's consciousness remained horrifyingly alive. The deactivation pulse had neutralized the nanites' ability to form a body, but it had not destroyed the mind. Instead, Jason was suspended in a perpetual hallucinatory dream state, a chaotic realm where his deepest desires, fears, and trauma of his nanite transformation battled for control. In this dream, Jason was back on Earth, in the or back to the life that had been stolen from him. The location of his uh, small town home, but the ear thrummed with the unsettling, silent vibration he now instinctively associated with the nanite presence. His focus, his entire being, was centered on Sarah Johnson, his ex girlfriend. Before Starfleet and the terrifying events, Sarah represented the simplicity, stability, and future he had lost. He chased her through familiar fields, across dusty roads, his subconsciousness desperately trying to cling to a memory of the life he should have had. The pursuit was frantic, fueled by a profound sense of loss, but also by a primal, um, incoherent need to with his reconnect and feel whole again. All right, when he finally caught her, the dream's reality fractured. They stood in the bedroom of his old farmhouse. The dream shifted violently to a scene of intense, desperate intimacy. Jason's subconsciousness, grieving for the loss of his male identity, tried to force a reunion to reestablish the relationship that had once been. But the world within the dream insisted on mirroring his reality. In the dream, Jason was suddenly in his transformed female form, the slender body, the long hair, and the unsettling presence of his large breasts. Sarah's face, uh, initially soft with love, twisted into confusion, then fear. Jason, overwhelmed by the dream's sensory reality, reached out, desperate to soothe her, to convince her that despite the change, he was still the same person she loved. Uh, this loving and familiar act of reunion began a fleeting moment of solace in his trapped existence. But the nanites, though neutralized, were still the engine of his consciousness, and they refused to allow his mind to find peace in a lie. As the intimacy reached its peak, the dream turned into a nightmare of cosmic violation. Sarah's face, inches from his, began to contort. The confusion in her eyes was replaced by pure, unadulterated horror. She saw not Jason, but the monstrous distortion of his new form. Sarah began to scream, a sound that ripped through the quiet of the farmhouse dream, a terrified, soul shattering shriek that echoed the screams Jason himself had made during his uncontrolled transformations. Jason, watching her terror and hearing her scream, was thrown into utter confusion and despair. He looked down at his own body. The once beautiful female form now appeared alien and grotesque in his own mind. He was no longer the active participant. He was the source of her fear, the monster of her nightmare. In the dream's final shattering moment, the dark, thick tentacle like appendage, a terrifying phantom of nanites, past monstrous creations, violently and uncontrollably thrust out from his body, not as an act of will, but as the final antagonizing manifestation of his internal psychological violation and the loss of all control. The scream, both Sarah's and his own, became one unified shriek of terror, and the entire dreamscape shattered into shards of light and overwhelming sensation, leaving Jason's unconsciousness to retreat back into the silent, shimmering darkness of the goo, horrified and alone. He was trapped, a mind tormented by the desire for what he had lost and the terrifying reality of what he had become, haunted by the fear that he was now the monster. All right, getting pressure from Starfleet. Captain Nora Richard returned to the Zandilar to find herself immediately under pressure, despite the ongoing classified investigation of the Obsidian Hand and Agent Kalen. Starfleet Command was focused on bureaucracy. The security station, Jason's past post, was officially listed as vacant, and the Zandilar's supply missions were critical. Admiral Vance, while sympathetic, was firm. Captain, the USS Zandilar was or is operating in a high risk sector. Your security chief, for all intents and purposes, a medical casualty of war. We cannot leave that post unmanned. You need to accept a replacement officer. Nora fought back. Admiral, the security risks isn't external. It's the threat of a nanite infiltrator. No new officer, no matter how well vetted, is safe until we understand how Kayleen managed to board. I have Jason's protocols, which his goo is assisting with, and a crew that is now hyper aware. My remaining crew can cover security, but the pressure was relentless. She received daily priority communiques detailing resumes of eligible security personnel. Nora knew her defiance couldn't last forever. She had to find a way to honor her promise to Jason not to give up on him while managing the operational demands of the ship. She simply assigned the security console duty to a rotating schedule of the bridge crew, leaving the official title of vacant for as long as possible. All right, continuing on our supply runs. The Zandilar, now fully repaired and more cautious than ever, resumed its long supply missions. The routes were the same, but the atmosphere on the bridge was fundamentally different. Every unusual sensor reading, every monitor system hiccup was met with instant, focused scrutiny. Sarah Johnson handled her astrogation duties with a quiet, new diligence, her pain from the breakup channeled into precise, triple checked calculations. She found comfort in the predictable movement of the stars, a stark contrast to the chaos of life on the ship. Ensign Polvik divided her time between the bridge and sickbay, where her primary duty was monitoring the sentient goo that was Jason. She experimented with Zandilar's comm system using low-level modulated carrier waves to try to elicit a response from his trapped consciousness, hoping to prove his mind was still intact. The ongoing crisis had forced Daniel Key and Dana Debbing into a proximity that transcended professional partnership. They were the architects of the Zandilar's survival, bonded by the adrenaline of the rescue and the shared guilt over the master nanite controller. Now their efforts were concentrated on analyzing the molecular com- composition of Jason's goo, searching for the core programming signature Kalen had targeted. They spent countless hours together in Engineering Lab 3, often working through the silent hours of Gamma Shift. The shared sorrow over Jason and the intellectual intensity of their work became a unique language between them. One night, Daniel was examining the schematic of a disassembled plasma conduit, tracing the path of the original nanite infestation. He was lost in concentration, his pad glowing over his face. It's the power regulation valve, isn't it, Dana? Dana's quiet voice broke the silence. She was sitting at a nearby console, her face lit by her own screen. Daniel looked up and startled. How did you know? I've been staring at that conduit for 6 months, Dana replied, but not just the damage, the way it failed. It always seemed to fail right after the power fluctuation, even a minor one. The nanite core was using the natural pulse of the ship's energy to activate its local decay. Um, it's elegantly cruel. Daniel closed his pad, a slow smile touching his lips. The first genuine smile Nora had seen from him in months. Elegantly cruel. Yes, that's precisely what I was concluding. You saved me 2 hours of calculation, Ensign. Dina shrugged. Then her usual reserve slipped. I miss him, Daniel. Jason, I keep thinking about how he'd be cracking jokes about the new warp efficiency settings or complaining about the mess hall food. Her voice cracked slightly, a rare admission of deep emotion. Daniel pushed his chair back, pulling a thermos of replicated tea. He reached across the console, not to touch her, but to offer her a mug. He would be the emotional regulator of the ship, wasn't he? He looked into the eyes, the intellectual bond giving way to something deeper. I feel responsible, Dana. I built the tool that did not that did that to him. I should have known better. Dana took the mug, their fingers brushing. For a fleeting moment, she held the warmth on her face. You saved the ship, Daniel. You saved us. You were thinking like an engineer under pressure, and you acted with speed. Keelan was the monster, not you. Their eyes held for a long moment, a shared understanding of grief and respect flowing between them. Daniel realized that Dana wasn't just his technical counterpart. She was the one person who truly understood the depth of his guilt and the intensity of his focus. I need to tell you something, Daniel finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something illogical. Dana set the mug down gently. I think after the last 6 months, Daniel, illogical is simply another variable. Tell me. He looked at the floor, then back at her. I I find myself thinking about you, even when the schematics are clear, even when the systems are stable. He hesitated, the words feeling huge and terrifying. I feel profoundly connected to you. It's more than work. Dana didn't react immediately. She simply met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then a slow, gentle smile spread across her face. Not her usual quick, polite smile, but one of genuine warmth. I know, Daniel, she replied softly. I've felt it too. I've been waiting for you to look up from the schematics long enough to see it. The admission hung in the air, a new tentative hope, blooming amidst the lingering shadow of loss. The Zandilar was still flying under a cloud of danger, but in the quiet engineering lab 3, a small, logical connection had finally acknowledged its illogical, heartfelt truth. All right, now we're getting on to new crew assignments. The pressure from Starfleet Command became too much to ignore. Reluctantly, Richards agreed to accept two new officers, not only to fill the command and security vacancies, but also to satisfy the bureaucracy demand for stability in a high risk sector. Nora knew she needed officers who could not only do the job, but could also quickly integrate into the Zandalar's unique and troubled situation. First Officer, Commander Eris Thorn. The new first officer was Commander Eris Thorn, a seasoned Vulcan tactician with a background in deep space intelligence. Thorn was assigned less for his exploration expertise and more for his reputation for logical detachment and absolute operational efficiency. Thorn was immediately made aware of the classified situation, the obsidian hand, the nanite sabotage, and the tragedy of Lieutenant Wellman. His presence brought a cool, analytical calm to the bridge, his though his very nature stood in stark contrast to the emotional warmth Nora usually fostered. Captain, Thorne stated during his introductory briefing, his voice a measured baritone. My function is to ensure the maximum operational efficiency. The emotional attachment to Lieutenant Wellman is understandable, but my counsel is to treat the goo as a contained, critical critical asset for now. We must focus resources on the confirmed threat. Nora appreciated the logic, even if the phrasing grated on her. Thorne's presence, however, freed her to focus on the broader strategic hunt for the obsidian hand. Security Officer, Lieutenant Valerie Val Casas. The new security officer was Lieutenant Valerie Val Casas, a human male fresh from a successful, if brief, tour on a star base deep in the Beta Quadrant. Val was assigned Jason's console, and he possessed an intense, almost relentless energy, constantly scanning the bridge and corridors. Nora, still sensitive about the security post, gave Val the blunt truth immediately, detailing the nanite attack and the abduction of the captain. Sir, ma'am, I understand the gravity, Val responded, his eyes sharp. I don't just secure the ship, I anticipate threats. If the enemy is invisible, we fight with sensors, not phasers. I'll take my cues from Lieutenant Wellman's old protocols and Ensign Johnson's analysis of Colleen's movements. Val immediately began integrating security sensors with Sarah's astrometrics console, looking for patterns in the Zandalar's past gremlin attacks that might reveal vulnerabilities Val could exploit, showing a necessary blend of skepticism and adaptability. Engineers' new helper, Unit Scrub. In engineering, Daniel and Dana, their tentative new relationship solidified by mutual trust and intellectual um, synchronicity, embarked on a practical solution to the ship's recent systematic fails. Their relationship remained focused largely on their work, a safe, shared world of problem solving. They can't rely on Starfleet to find the next micro saboteur, Daniels stated, hunched over a fabrication workbench, and sending crew into every sputtering conduit is inefficient and dangerous. We need a dedicated micro diagnostic system, something that doesn't breathe, doesn't get emotional, and can fit where we can't. Dana finished, her eyes gleaming with shared enthusiasm. Their project was Unit Scrub, Sub Conduit Robotic Utility Buddy. Scrub was a small, multi legged maintenance robot about the size of a cat, built from spare parts and reinforced uranium plating. All right, so we have key features here for Scrub. Thinking of it in like a role playing sense here, we have custom sensor array. Daniel equipped Scrub with a miniaturized high frequency molecular scanner capable of detecting trace elements of nanite residue or exotic molecular signatures that human senses and standard sensors might miss. Intuitive interface. Dana programmed Scrub's navigational matrix to map the Zandilar's entire internal conduit system, prioritizing areas of recent gremlin activity. It moved with an almost unnerving intuition, able to self correct and bypass blockages. We also have a personal touch. Dana designed the robot's casting to be slightly rounded and its optic lenses to project a soft, reassuring blue light, giving the little machine an endearing, non-threatening appearance despite its vital and often dirty work. Scrub quickly became an indispensable member of the engineering team. It could tirelessly crawl through plasma conduits and air circulation ducts, constantly broadcasting data on microfractures, energy leaks, and foreign molecular traces. Scrub was flagged Scrub just flagged a plasma leak on Deck 4, Section Alpha, Dana would report, watching the robot's data stream. It's minor, but it's exactly where the secondary life support failed 3 months ago. The decay process is starting again. Scrub wasn't just fixing the ship, it was preempting future sabotage by exposing the slow, insidious decay process that the obsidian hand nanites were designed to initiate. Daniel and Dana, working in tandem with their little robotic companion, were slowly but surely tightening the defenses on the Zandilar, turning their knowledge of the enemy's attack patterns into the ship's greatest asset. They were a team of three now, ready for the next threat. All right, modernizing weapon systems. With the threat of the Obsidian Hand confirmed and their ship showing resilience against the internal sabotage, the engineering team turned their focus outward. The consensus, spearheaded by Commander Eris Thorne's logical assessment, was that the Zandilar's standard phaser arrays and photon torpedoes were inadequate for engaging a foe capable of advanced bioinfiltration and cloaking technology, should the Romulan device ever be recovered and studied. Daniel Key and Dana Deming tackled the upgrading with their signature blend of theoretical genius and practical intuition, often assisted by the diligent monitoring of Unit Scrub. All right, phase one, phasing pulse array enhancement. Sorry. The first priority was to overhaul the ship's phaser systems. Daniel theorized that the Obsidian Hand might utilize some of the adaptive biological shielding similar to the resilience seen in the nanites. They modified the existing phaser banks to fire in an oscillating energy pulse. This phase pulse consistently shifts its frequency between three distinct energy bands, a feature reverse engineered from the energy patterns of the original Romulan cloaking device fragments. The goal was to prevent any single shield or energy shield from adapting quickly enough to the incoming fire, effectively bypassing adaptive shielding. Dana managed to manage the complex rewriting and power flow, ensuring the new firing mechanism didn't immediately overload the very conduits they had just repaired. Second, the micro torpedo integration. The second major upgrade was the photon torpedo system. Instead of focusing on massive explosive power, they focus on precision and delivery. They designed and integrated a new type of projectile, the micro torpedo. These were smaller, faster, and carried less payload than the standard photon torpedoes, but could be fired in denser salvos. Critically, each micro torpedo was equipped with a modified sensor package tuned to detect the subtle disruptive energy patterns associated with nanite infiltration. The micro torpedoes could be programmed to detonate on contact with any structure emitting those specific signatures, making them ideal for targeting structures or vessels partially composed of nanite material. These engineering projects were more than just ship upgrades, they were therapy for Daniel and Dana. The intense focused work on making the Zandilar safer and more dangerous provided a logical outlet for their grief and guilt over Jason, hitting a wall on the obsidian hand. So, despite the operational improvements, the active hunt for the obsidian hand had stalled, frustrating Captain Richards and her command crew. All right, we're running into a intelligence vacuum. Admiral Vance confirmed that Agent Kaelin's goo, while yielding a wealth of genetic data and nanite replication and structural mimicry, offered zero additional tactical intelligence. The nanite construct had no memory banks that could be read. Um, and as its consciousness was entirely lost upon deactivation, the only lead they had, the coordinates Nora had transmitted to Kaelin's transport, led to a sterile, vacant remains of the abandoned outpost. Lieutenant Val Costas, the new security officer, proved adept in anticipating conventional threats, but felt useless against the foe that dissolved on contact and operated from the shadows. He pored over the data logs of the gremlin attacks, but they had or led to a singular depressing conclusion. The saboteur was only on board for a minimal amount of time, like during the initial salvage. The operation with surgical near perfect stealth, Val needed an external target, but the obsidian hand was invisible. Ensign Polvik faced a painful choice in sickbay. Her continued attempts to elicit a conscious response from Jason's goo using modulated carrier waves were failing. The silence was absolute. Commander Thorne logically advised Nora to turn the goo over to Starfleet Medical for mass scale nanite research, arguing that its potential scientific value outweighed the emotional cost of keeping it aboard. Nora continued to refuse, but the pressure mounted with every silent diagnostic. Commander Thorne presented his findings to Captain Richards. Captain, our current situation is one of resource inefficiency. The enemy's method is to force us to react defensively. They have vanished, and we are reacting to past threats. Our focus must shift from tactical pursuit of a ghost to the strategic identification of their origin. He proposed a cold truth. The Zandalar's unique value was not as a hunter, but as bait. They were the only Federation ship known to have survived a full nanite infiltration and possess a crew that intimately understood the enemy's methods. The Obsidian Hand wanted the Zandalar gone, or at least they wanted the information contained within Jason's goo. Nora looked at the improved combat schematics, then at the empty chair where Jason belonged. The logical next step was terrifying. They had to lure the Obsidian Hand out of the shadows. The question remained, how could they make the bait irresistible without putting the Zandalar and her crew in mortal danger again? All right, that concludes part 5 here. We'll get part 6 going on. And hopefully, we'll have it up tomorrow. With all of that being said, thank you for stopping by. Thanks for visiting. It's wonderful having you here. Hope you guys are enjoying this. I know it's been fun kind of going through all this. It's a lot of reading for me, and I know I'm not the best at reading. And I've had comments on that, and I'll take every one of the criticisms that I get. Look, I know I'm not the best reader, and we go through that. With that, hope you're doing well, and I will see you in the next video.